We're talking today with Mr. Albert Engel of Ada, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Now, Mr. Engel, can you begin by giving us some background on yourself? To start with, where and when were you born?
Where and when what?
Were you born?
I was born in 312 North Main Street in Lake City, in what is now the living room. My father was off politicking in Grand Rapids, and we only had one car, and my mother was too busy to drive it. And so I was born at home. That house is still there. It's well kept even now. It's owned by the widow of whose husband was a younger brother of my best friend. Who's now, both of them are now gone. She's remarried, and she's. It's a centennial house now. We've lived in, the family has been occupied it since 1920. I guess.
Okay. Now, did you grow up in Michigan or somewhere else?
Yes, very much so. That's why my father's his story is important, because he was in politics right from the start. He graduated. His is a long and much more vital story, I think. He was a farm boy, and he was raised until he ran away from home in Mayfield Township on a farm operated by his father. And he was from a Catholic family. His father was a tall, musical, unusually unusually versatile person, except he didn't know how to farm, but he knew how to raise kids, I guess. He was the next to the last of 6 children, I believe that's correct, and all of whom ultimately did well. But he and his brother had immigrated from Alsace-Lorraine, and he finally settled, and he finally settled in that area for good. But he come over by boat. He and his brother had come over by boat. Don't know much about when or how, but my dad was born en route. Or my father, my father was born in a small town of Cleveland, East Cleveland or something like that. And he was keeping the family together and traveling westward till he finally got to the Grand Traverse area. So my father was born in a small town just on the outskirts of Cleveland, but the family stayed together and moved further. And his brother, I believe his brother had, he and his brother were both married before they got this far west, and they had worked. And he was a very devout Catholic. And he was musical. He played the organ for St. Mary's Church in Hannah, that little town up north. He also had he had done some teaching in school en route. I don't know a great deal about that. I didn't know all of his family, but he was a big guy and a good swimmer. Had red hair like I did, and like our grandchildren have. And his wife died when my father was around 12 or 13 years old, and he remarried, which is not unusual in those days. But my father did not get along with her.
Mm-hmm.
If I could somehow get us down in the basement, I could show you a picture of the family. My father, I think, was a rebel. He was a cute kid and precocious, and couldn't get along with his stepmother. So he ran away, probably around 14, 15 years old, and worked in the lumber mills in mostly in Leelanau County, if you know where that is. And saved his money. His older sister and brother were already out on their own, and his brother, oldest brother, had moved to Chicago. She had married a lawyer there, and he had established himself in business. So my father was short. He was a short one in the family, which has its own characteristics. But he was bright, and so he went and stayed with his sister till he could get a job downtown, and he worked with what was the big Marshall Fields, and his eventually he found his own. He went to work at lived at the YMCA, and went to school there at the high school at a school downtown, YMCA school. And this is my he was quite a dynamic guy. I don't know if you've read anything about him or not, but he's got quite a history. And he ended up anyway. He got to Chicago, and then he missed by 1 hour of credit his undergraduate degree at Northwestern. This would be the Northwestern that was then in Chicago, not the one that was in the north.
Right.
I don't know if they had any school at that time there. But anyway, his brother-in-law was a lawyer, was a downtown lawyer. They're all scrapping along best they could. So he got to law school, and he did well. He did well. I wish he was here so he could tell you some of his escapades. But he was very dynamic.
Now, did he also serve in the Army?
What?
Did he?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. That accounts for the difference. The question of his age. He lied about his age so that he could be qualified to go to officer training in Fort Sheridan in I guess that's in Wisconsin.
Well, that's still Illinois.
That area.
Yeah.
And got away with it. And matter of fact, my mother even believed it. It was only after he had retired from Congress that we found out the real date. And when the lady, the Social Security director in Muskegon, was a good friend of mine. By that time I was out of the army, and I was mature. So he had developed a Christmas tree business. I don't know if you knew about that or not. Well, he always wanted to get back to the farm. He really loved being on the farm, and he worked in the lumber camps. So as the war, he was in World War I, and he was on General Pershing's staff. He was in intelligence then, and that. Half people thought he was intelligence, half thought because he had a name, German name, that he was German, and that half thought probably that he was of doubtful loyalty. And, but he solved that pretty well. They were tagging him, and they finally decided to give him a commission. So he worked his way down from Fort. Well, his brother-in-law, his oldest sister's husband, died within a year after my dad graduated from law school. So, and he did not have enough age. He was too young to carry on. He wasn't there that long. So he decided he was going to go to Hawaii just because he liked Hawaii. And I was about the same way. I wanted to go to Oregon because it was there, you know. And he went up. He went up to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, at the Keweenaw Peninsula, and tried practicing law there. I didn't know that he was starving to death or whether he was frozen to death, but it didn't last very long. And he came on. He came on back and settled, at least temporarily, near his home in Mayfield Township. And when the war came, he moved, trying to look for clients, and he came. How do I say it? He always had money. And he was helping to support his father. Father got up in years. And he stayed on close terms with his family. And he ended up in Lake City for the simple reason that there was no other lawyer in the county, which is often what happened in those days. And once he was there, he got involved in politics. And he ran as a Republican. And curiously, the ward politics in Chicago was Republican. At least that which he saw. And so he survived. He did well. He got involved in real estate with some local people there. Happened to develop home sites and so forth in that old area. And he ultimately got elected. But first of all, he was prosecuting attorney in, I guess it would be Grand Traverse County. But I'm not sure. And and then the war came on. and he gave up his job as prosecuting attorney, which was then promptly taken by a Democrat, which was fine and anybody would do, but the work he went overseas. He spent about 22 months in France, Bordeaux, and also with the 32nd Division, Redern.
Yeah.
But he stayed. But he could not get he could not get himself a combat post. And his papers, some of which I should have somewhere around here, have his have 5 rejection of his applications to serve at the front. He really wanted to get in the middle of things. He was very patriotic. I think with a German name and coming from Alsace-Lorraine, he felt he had to prove himself in some way. Anyway, he eventually worked his way down to Lake City, and where he met my mother. My mother had, in the meantime, been born in 1891. In jail. Her father being sheriff.
Okay.
And he carried on the romance all the way overseas and back. And so he was discharged as a captain, and he kept in touch with people, with General Pershing. And when he got to Congress, he went over to the hospital. And Pershing was out up in years, and he kept in touch with him. And also with his former dean, he had a very good, Northwestern, a very good law school. And so he had an interesting job, but he didn't like it. And I forget how long he served overseas. It wasn't all that much, but it was enough to give him what he wanted. And he came back and then practiced law in Lake City. He had to kick his successor out. He said the deal wasn't that he would be allowed. And I knew the family. It was a Cadillac, and he claimed a right to return to his job. The guy wouldn't give it to him, so he beat him in the election instead. But the families were always pretty good friends. My mother and that family, they were in Cadillac. They're a pretty well-to-do family. And he finally was buried my mother on July 13, 1920. And 9 months and 1 day later or so, my oldest sister arrived. Then 3 years after that, 1924, I was born. And he served, after he served, he ran for Congress a couple times. He came close but lost. He tried 3 times. It was only on the 4th try that he got elected. It was the smallest county up there. But he was busy. He had an abstract business. he got involved in everything. So he settled into Lake City, and my mother's father had been sheriff, and he had been also later on when she grew up. He was president of the bank. You could do all those things at one time in those days, and he wooed her. It's an old-fashioned romance, but my mother had been engaged before, but she broke it off, and she married my dad, and that was it for both of them.
Mm-hmm.
She was an inch and a half shorter than he, but she's always careful to wear low shoes, and she lied about her height while he lied about his age.
All right.
And so when I went, like I say, years later, when I was practicing law in Muskegon, and my dad he retired from Congress in his 65th year, and he had been working on investing in land. They had gotten through the Depression, and and then he was doing real estate, and he did well in it. And he made good friends, and people who were involved. He just got himself involved, and so he ran for Congress. Finally, he spent 8 years in the Michigan Senate, and he was chairman of the Finance Committee of the Senate. He did well, always honest, and quite a romantic guy. And so in checking, Sylvia Paul was the name of the Social Security director in the area. I remember that. And she had office in the same building I was practicing law in when I finally got out of law school. She said, "Well, he didn't want to take any Social Security. Didn't want to pay any Social Security tax. You know, all that had happened since he'd been in Congress,
Mm-hmm.
and he wasn't very well familiar with it. And so I finally convinced him that he better do it, if they were not going to. And so she helped me. So we tried to find evidence of his birth, and we found it in the church, in the church records in Cleveland Heights or something, a little town over there, and it had the correct date was 2 years more older, which he knew, but he didn't admit. And so we just went by that. By that time, we went with the record that we could establish, and he did not want to take Social Security either. It wasn't that he didn't believe in it; he didn't feel he earned it because he'd been in Congress, and so he before I left overseas, he had started to acquire land. It was easily acquired because there was so much of it up for taxes. So he picked up 1,500 acres, mostly in Missaukee County, and started raising Christmas trees, and that's another complete story. And of course, he and I had I had difficulties with him because I wanted to do my own thing, and he wanted me to do what he wanted me to do. And he needed another son. He never had it. I had one who died at birth. So anyway, he moved back to our house in Lake City, and in 1933, he ran. The congressman was a Democrat when he ran for Congress, and he beat the incumbent who had beaten my dad 2 years before, but he was going to try it again. So in 1935, he was elected to Congress, and he served 8 terms. That was took him all the way through to his period of retirement.
Right.
And he really made quite a name for himself in Congress. Mm-hmm. You probably don't know much about that. You could probably find a lot out of him just by digging into the computer. Again, Missaukee County was the smallest county in the what was then the 9th district. And he won, but it was very close. And in 1936 came along, and he won again by about 500 votes. That was where Roosevelt really had his landslide. Mm-hmm. So then, he would take us. He didn't like to be away from his family, and so we from that period on, just about the rest of his life, he was back and forth between Muskegon and Washington and Lake City and Washington.
Now, did you go to school in Michigan? Did you go to high school in Michigan?
No.
Okay. Where did you go?
I graduated from Western High School in Georgetown, which is a suburb. I'm near the subject.
Yeah.
No, I went. The last I went to school in Michigan would have been when I was in the 8th grade. I went 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I had gone to something like, I took the tickets out of one school, put us in another 4 years in a row to 5 schools in 4 years. I wasn't happy with it. I loved Lake City. I really was. My friends were all there, and I really hated it. Mm-hmm. Well, I met a lot of kids in Washington who were similarly involved, and Prentice Brown was senator at that time, and I knew that family. They were Democrats, but they were all right because they came from up north. And he was the father of the bridge. Mm-hmm. And anyway, I grew up in a mixed environment, totally,
right.
just two entirely different lifestyles, and I hated it.
No. When Pearl Harbor happened, were you still in high school?
No, when Pearl Harbor happened, I gave a talk about this about 3 or 4 years ago, just on the spur of the moment, which was very successful. I didn't realize how kids would want to have a story like that, and they had I was supposed to, the Hackley Trust paid me to give a speech and about for Pearl Harbor. So I was able to do that, and they just loved it. I was supposed to give the real intellectual speech beforehand, and that was just a little bit too much for the adults. But the kids loved the story of my I had my I had I was upstairs in my room on 4518 Lowell Street, which is in Wesley Heights, Washington, which is a nice section. So that we got the. I was on Sunday, and we got the news while I was at home. I was at University of Maryland in my freshman year. Didn't want to be there. I wanted to go to Michigan. But he was always trying to save money, and you could save it by staying at home. Mm-hmm. That's where I didn't want to be. And, so we had quite a father-son problem there. And it was exciting. And I talked about that on the Heckley lectures here several years ago now. And the kids really reacted to that. Finally, I got somebody to listen to it. And they had a luncheon the following day at one of the community college over there, in which they had it was for all the honor students in the 8 high schools in the area, and that was really fun. I had decided that I was not going to be able to succeed. They said, "Well, just give a short capsule on what you did." I said, "Well, it won't work." So I told the minutiae of my day. I was upstairs in my bedroom, and I had doing my homework. When the word came in, and then we were not too far from Massachusetts Avenue, and Massachusetts Avenue was where the Japanese embassy was. So that was pretty exciting, and because my dad was then he was in Congress, and he was also in the Appropriations Committee, which is the top spot, if you can imagine it. So the phone was just ringing off the hook. So anyway, we found out that each congressman would get one ticket to the speech that President Roosevelt was going to give on the following Monday. So it was agreed that I would have the seat because I was 17, and my dad said the war would be won by the time I was 18, which was wishful thinking. He didn't really fool me. He didn't even fool himself. So anyway, I went in. Well, let me see now. Well, anyway, I wrote downtown to his office on the next day, and I got the seat, and the seat was just behind and to the left of where the cameras were focused on President Roosevelt, and she gave the Day in Infamy speech. Mm-hmm. So that was a pretty good start. And I immediately started putting maps up all over the place and really loving it. And I he'd see my opening and he'd get out of the way, get away from home. And he would spoil me. He really couldn't complain about my wanting to do all this because he'd done the same damn thing himself.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm sure he, anyway, I was due to graduate. No.
Did you want to enlist right away?
What?
Did you want to enlist right away after Pearl Harbor? Did you
No.
want to? Okay.
No, I was 16, 17.
Yeah.
No. But what I did, I said, well, I was in ROTC. And my dad did not want me to go in the Army. And, although that's exactly what he wanted,
Mm-hmm.
but not for me. And he was already starting to develop the Christmas tree farm. He thought I was going to, he'd have my art life just laid out in front of him, and I didn't necessarily see it that way. Meantime, I'd become a little more accommodated to Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
I had friends in both places. By then, I'd overcome a lot of that hesitation. So, I said, I would get my second year. I was in my sophomore year. I was in my freshman year as I was at University of Maryland. My sister Margaret was in her, I think, senior year at University of Maryland, and my dad did not want me to go to Michigan because that was too far away. He really had to have his family with him, and so I said, I've got my sophomore year, my junior year coming up, but I should take it in. I think it was my sophomore year, my second year. I should take it. He'd always promised that I could switch over to the University of Michigan in my junior year, and I was in ROTC. And incidentally, I was in ROTC, and I was 18 when I went into the Army, and I already had 3 years of military training in high school in Washington,
Mm-hmm.
plus 2 years of college. The second, and I told him, I said, I have a better chance of getting out of the, getting a deferment for ROTC by switching right now instead of waiting till it's too late. Well, he wanted. He also tried to bribe me by buying me a Ford convertible. So he's getting along in those ways, but anyway, that got me out of Maryland, and I did all right in Maryland. Into Michigan, I had joined a fraternity in Maryland, and then I transferred to a fraternity at Michigan, of which I later become the president.
And then, did you spend 1 year in Michigan then?
What?
Then did you spend 1 year at Michigan before going into the Army?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I did. And then my sophomore year, I was in the service for 38 months. And we all went to hell that year. but I survived. And I made good friends then, which I still have, many of them. Well, which I used to still have until a few years ago when they all started dropping off on me.
Right. Now, when did you report for duty? Or tell me about joining the Army. How did you do that?
Yes. I should have a written record of this. Politics. My dad was really nationally, much more, really nationally prominent in the news. He had made a lot of, he was a predecessor to President Truman's work. And Truman was in the Senate, and Dad was the House. Truman was a Democrat. Got along fine, and he got the presidency, which he never expected. But anyway, I had. Sorry, come on in. Is that for us?
It's for you.
I'm drying up, huh?
I can hear it.
Okay. This is Tina Walker. She
looks
our
after you.
housekeeper.
Here.
Thank you.
You want some?
Anyway.
All right. So joining the Army.
So I transferred over in my sophomore year, and they had gone into a 3-semester program. I had no trouble with grades. I had done well the first year. There, of course, and so anyway, I agreed. My sister was still in college that time, and therefore it was really our car. And of course, that was a pretty big temptation in those days. And so, but I said, well, if I transferred then in my junior year, if I did, I thought I had a better chance of going all the way in the ROTC.
Mm-hmm.
It was easy for me. I had 3 years of high school training and 2 years of military training in ROTC. And I was still 18. So it wasn't exactly a lie, but I just said that I understood I have a much better transferring now when I was still 16 or so than I would if I waited until it was too late. So I switched over to Ann Arbor, but I very quickly in the sophomore year went to hell. It was too much freedom, and so that was what I decided at the end of my freshman.
You get it, Tina?
I guess you did. Okay.
Should I continue?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you got to the end of your sophomore year.
I was anyway. I was saying goodbye every night to a fraternity brother, and that was kind of rough. And but I wasn't doing much to study. We had a problem in the family that way. But anyway, I took the train, and started with the sophomore. I guess sophomore year at Michigan, and I really did poorly, and I just didn't give a damn. You know, everybody was saying goodbye, and the P-Bell down in our got, you know, we were all doing our thing, and so Pearl Harbor came in that year while I was still at Maryland, and I just told my dad I wasn't going to go back to school. Well, he was out investigating. This was funny. He was out investigating war plants. If you go into that period of time, pick any newspaper and follow his name, he was getting a lot of publicity, which is not good for the son of congressman. And so anyway, he was taking. He was even then thinking about the Christmas tree farm, so he was picking up land all around in the townships outside to the east for a Christmas tree farm, and he was starting to raise trees, and he had mean that was I was going to finish that up and he's going to raise trees. Well, that took care of that for the time being. So I went to the Army from District of Columbia. That's where I had registered. And I'd ask for the infantry. Old man, I had to do the same as he did. Yeah. And he was supposed to, I was going in on, I forget the day of the week, it was in January or February. So I had my orders to go to report in downtown Washington, and where we'd be transported to Camp Lee, Virginia. That's where I would get sworn in, and in the Army and become a PF, become a private, which was fine. I had been a sergeant and a corporal and a first lieutenant in high school, but this was different. This was real. And so I was transferred. We went to to Petersburg. If you know your history, Petersburg is where it was a suburb of
Richmond. Yeah.
Famous in history.
Right.
And so he was supposed to pick me, come back, and be there when I went in the Army. And as luck would have it, he was supposed to. He cracked up a car in, I think, Shaker Heights or someplace, northern Ohio. He ran into a train. And so we didn't know quite, it was quite traumatic with us, you know, her husband not knowing alive or dead, and our son going to the Army all within 24 hours. But anyway, he came in. I'm sure it was his fault, but my father's secretary was Frederick Reed, that was with my father then as a secretary for all during the rest of the war. And he became sort of a surrogate father for me because my dad was always off someplace doing his own thing. And so my orders were, I started my basic training, and we went all the way down to Savannah and up to camp. Anyway, an infantry training camp.
So Camp Gordon or Camp Gordon or Camp Stewart?
And what?
Gordon or Stewart?
Oh, Gordon.
Yeah.
Oh, Gordon, junior high.
No.
Camp Gordon. There were
No.
Oh, different camp. Okay.
No. Camp Wheeler.
Wheeler. Okay.
Camp Wheeler was it, and so I was quite excited by it, and I went there, and I really wasn't that good at it. I mean, I wasn't. It was a whole bunch of mountain boys there, and I was learning fast. Best thing ever happened to me, and so. I was supposed to leave at 9 o'clock next morning and go downtown to the transport headquarters. We get a bus. We take a bus to Camp Lee, where from which we would get all of our clothes issued, the initial work,
Yeah.
get the skinny haircut and all that stuff. So, and that caused quite a stir when my dad, he was banged up pretty badly, but he wouldn't, he took him, he cut his clothes up, he really totaled the car, and I was supposed to leave, and I told them I couldn't tell them where I was going, but I could stop by. If we had to make a change of trains in Washington. Well, Fred Reed, who knew a lot more than my dad or I did, he managed to get me a 24-hour
Pass.
deferment, if you will, to get my father home, and and he finally made it. I thought we'd just spend some time at the station, Union Station there down well, if you know where that is, and so we held up long enough for my dad to come in on the train. He came in on a Pennsylvania Railroad train, and I was supposed to leave. And but my orders were transferring me to transferring me to Aberdeen Proving Ground, which is a ordnance department's headquarters. I don't know if you know what ordnance is. You know what that means.
It's weapons and
weapons and automatic equipment,
right,
and whatever you have. And I was quite thrilled. Frankly, I was not that happy with the infantry.
Okay, but you had finished basic training.
Huh?
So you completed basic.
No, I got about halfway into basic training.
Okay, and then you got orders to go to.
Then I got orders. It was a restricted order. Well, I didn't know diddly about that, but I thought it's not restricted. I mean, I couldn't tell anybody. Well, I know better now, but Fred knew better.
Mm-hmm.
You don't take a congressman's son in this situation and not do it. So anyway, so come on back to the state, spend the night in the house, and go down tomorrow. And so he went to the phone and he got that. But anyway, when I got back to the house in Wesley Heights, so I spent the night. He said, "There's always delay en route." He says, "That's the favorite of all people who are moving around. Get a little delay en route." He said, "Everybody does it. Go ahead." So I didn't know. So he brought me back to the house, and that's when my dad told me that he he already knew where I was going. Well, how did you know? Well, General, the head of Chief of Ordnance, had me transferred. Yeah. I said, what the hell do you mean? He didn't tell me anything about this. And I was mad. I was really angry. I thought I had promoted myself. I had scored a perfect score in a signal corps test. I thought, well, maybe this is what this is. I don't know. But anyway, I was really bitter with my father sticking his nose in my business. And it took me a long time to overcome that. And he obviously, and he said, well, General Campbell was the ordnance, chief of ordnance. And he said, well, he says, if his state, my dad was, is if he's half as good as his dad, we want him.
Mm-hmm.
You know what that was? That was just sheer, and I knew that. I wasn't that dumb. You know?
Yeah.
So I was being transferred for political purposes. So that's how I got into it. And in the meantime, I was started up in basic training again at Aberdeen Proving Ground, which was quite interesting, really. And so I was pretty pissed off. So it was bad enough being a congressman's son, but to have that kind of favoritism when you've asked for an infantry was, my dad thought that was just great, you know.
Mm-hmm. Now, how was basic training at Aberdeen different from basic training at Camp Wheeler?
Well, the emphasis, people who were in basic training for ordnance would have to get, that was a different department with engineer, different subjects in school, different kinds of military training. When I got there, when I got to Aberdeen, Aberdeen is on the Chesapeake Bay, and I didn't know much about it. It sounded awfully good to me until I found out the truth of the matter, and that really threw me. I just didn't like it. So, so I started into it. Nothing much I could do, but I was really angry. And that's what he said. He said, well, that's a General Campbell. Well, who the hell is General Campbell, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I was 18, and I always kidded myself. When my father was running for Congress, I called myself Exhibit A, family man. And I didn't like that.
Okay. Now, did the men you were training with, did everybody know you were a congressman's son?
I didn't tell them. Somebody, yes, they did know. Yeah. I wanted to get my, I wanted to use the Freedom of Information Act to get my records. I never have gotten them yet. And of course, I knew the infantry drill regulations inside out, and so it was pretty much easy for me. It had both the best training was high school training.
Mm-hmm.
It really was good. Congress had provided for high school ROTC, not cadet corps training, to protect Washington in case the British sit by the HS, come up Bladensburg Road and burn the Capitol and White House again, which was happened over 100 years ago. So anyway,
now, did you completed?
Well, I applied
basic
for
training?
it. They told me it was time to apply for OCS. which is what I intended to do,
Mm-hmm.
but for the infantry, not knowing any better. And so I went through basic training, and while I was there, to show you, I had an order to report to the commanding general of the base.
Mm-hmm.
And he was sucking all over. My dad really had power.
Mm-hmm.
He they were scared as devil of him. So the interview with the commanding general when you're a private was not exactly credible, except, you know. So anyway, I got through that basic training, and I had some trouble. I had some physical. I got pneumonia a couple times. I was hospitalized a couple times, and I was not athletic. But anyway, I survived that interview. He just wanted to meet me and see me, and obviously somebody in Washington told him to do it. Well, anyway, I applied for OCS. Of course, I had, 2 years of college, 5 years of military. It was a really good record.
Okay. At this point,
Okay.
my now tell us.
Well, okay. I went before. That was interesting. I got a good school. I did not do well. I was too young. Stressed because I was being used.
Now tell me about OCS.
Right?
What did you do in OCS?
I went before. That was interesting. I got a good schooling in the political side of ordnance. I did not do well. I was too young. I was depressed because I was being used, and I didn't feel anything I did make any damn difference. You know, it wasn't what I had in mind for myself, and I didn't know anything about motors or guns or anything like that. When I got out of basic training ordnance, then I was transferred to the 40th Ordnance Company, which is the largest company in the world, 4,000 men in one company. That was sort of the organizational company in Aberdeen. Mm-hmm. And we had the officers were fine. The younger officers were fine, but when I got before the board, my dad, they had a big spread on Time magazine just the week before. I've sent that stuff down to Ann Arbor. Anyway, the first question they asked me was, he said, well, you know, was it, how would he put it? Was it your father who was raising on that hill with the army? I said, yes, sir. And I didn't give very intelligent answers. I didn't know what to do, and so I was not approved. No, basically, my responses were not good. I don't blame him. I wouldn't have done the same thing to myself, frankly. And so I was not immediately sent to training, but I guess they didn't dare kick me out. I suppose it certainly wasn't natural, and so they said, "Well, I needed more training." Well, that was a bunch of baloney. I was overtrained, you know. But anyway, I was put into a. They kept the records there, and I was put in learning basic training all over again. It didn't make any sense, you know. You're not going to take me, don't take me. But anyway, I was pretty well down, and so I had an interesting time at that time because I met a lot of other kids who were politicians' children.
Oh.
You know, and it proved out nearly all the way. They ran into two different categories: those who loved the political favoritism, and those who couldn't stand it. You know. Well, I made a couple of good friends in the army. At our training, we had an officer who was given to, was in charge of the additional training we were supposed to get, which was, they didn't know what to do. And by that time, I didn't much care. And that took my confidence rate way down. So, they gave us drills. Now, you weren't in the military, were you?
No.
Well, anyway, I from my high school training, I had all the tricks of the trade, and I knew what was coming. This was funny. One of the exercises they have for voicing command and for giving orders, close order drill, what have you, was that you put all the people on a circle, and then the tactical officer would put one man inside the circle, and then he would call off the next name to give orders, and the game was to keep the soldier marching inside the circus, and you were out if you couldn't stop him before he got out. Well, I knew that old game, and they didn't know I knew. So, but I could see it coming. I knew he started off with nobody, and then finally, just exactly what I expected happened. He got a guy in there, and they gave him double time, and the guy was supposed to get double time. And just before he stepped out of the ring, he yelled Engel. So there's only one way to avoid getting out. There's only one command, which I knew about, to get you to stop before you leave the circle, because there wasn't enough time. There weren't enough steps.
Mm-hmm.
There's forward march, double time, Engel, and here he is, he's got 1 foot out of the ring, and I yelled. What did I yell?
I don't know. About face?
Huh?
About face? Halt?
It would be out by then.
Okay.
The only command exists in the infantry drill regulations, which called for an immediate halt, was the word gas. And I was right on the button on that. And the guy just shook his head and started laughing, you know. And I went on into OCS then. And OCS, I really did. I enjoyed a lot of OCS. I met a lot of interesting people. Some of them, they were all types. I was one of all types. And yet it was an interesting bunch. The one fellow was in our barracks. Was an engineer, and he was there to learn anti-aircraft weaponry. And Donald Fry, he later became vice president of the Ford division of Ford Motor Company, and he was the man who was responsible for the design of the what was the famous
Mustang.
The Mustang?
huh?
The Mustang?
The Mustang.
Can't hear you.
Mustang.
The Thunderbird.
Okay.
Was it Thunderbird?
Well, could be. That's a Ford, yeah.
Yeah. And so he did that, and then he, later on, and he and I became good friends. He was interesting, and he was honest. And so he came into Washington with us a couple of times, just for the weekend. And I had heard from him a couple of times, but then we lost touch as you do. And, he later became CEO, chair of the board of a company in Illinois. Anyway, he was very interesting. And people there were interesting, and it was quite a gap between the people who were qualified and those who were not. Well, I did not do well in OCS, and I knew it. We had a fine officer, a second lieutenant, who was called a tactical officer. And I knew all the technical stuff very well, I mean, as much as you could at that age. But anyway, I was really wounded. I was so discouraged. And I finally, our officer, he took me aside, and he told me, he said, you know, I would have busted you out of here based upon the votes of your colleagues who thought you were not prepared. I said, no, it didn't surprise me any. And I told him what had happened. And he said, well, why don't you just forget about all that? He said, but do you know why? Yeah, I'm not doing it. I said, no, I do not know. Well, he said, we have these, we just got through evaluating the others in your class. And you had about the lowest scores of anybody. But one person whom I knew, I didn't know well, put you at the top. And did you know that? I said, no, I had no idea. And so I called him aside. I said, how come Engel, you gave him high score? He said, remember, I worked as officer of the day one night with him, and I can't remember now what the incident was, but we were both on duty all night long together, and he was the top guy in the top class. And I said, how come you gave Engel such a good score? Nobody else did. He says, well, I says he knew what he was doing. And we had some kind of a problem. It came on in the night. And he says, I didn't know what to do. And Engel made a suggestion, and I did it, and it worked. And I don't know what to say about that, except I was impressed.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the way it went with me most of the time. Well, we got graduated, and then before we graduated, we had our choice of options of where we wanted to go, and this is when they said they needed officers for bomb disposal. Well, I'd never heard anything about them before. So anyway, I volunteered for bomb disposal, and I met another bunch of people who were really interesting, and I really liked it. For one thing, nobody did that for a living. You can learn from fresh,
Mm-hmm.
and I also, so we went to bomb disposal school, and then while I was in bomb disposal school, that was it, and I also spent a couple of days at the Navy bomb disposal school, which was within walking distance
Mm-hmm.
of our home in Wesley Heights.
Mm-hmm.
So I had that. My first fuse I took out was from a Navy fuse. So we got about halfway through that, and then we were assigned our outfit. Well, the basic unit for bomb disposal was 6 officers. No, one officer, a captain, and 6 a technician, 5th class, a full sergeant, and the rest of the 6 men, among them 4 men as technicians, 2nd class.
Mm-hmm.
So you're supposed to go with our unit and train with them in preparation for going overseas. They also said they are a priority item because they need them now.
Now, before we go on, I want to ask a couple other questions.
What?
When they were training you, what kind of bombs did you practice on? Did you see any German stuff or just American?
Well, first of all, the training, the camp was designed, or the bomb, that part of the camp was a big outfit. They tested the bombs, and they needed people to take, if they didn't go off, which I think they probably got them not to go off sometimes, which they should have. So I went to that school, and I met my outfit. I was very happy with them. Mm-hmm. Nothing's too bad it's not. Well, anyway, I was assigned as commanding officer of the 80th Bomb Disposal Squad. And as such, when we finished our training, we were transferred to a port. I can't remember. Of debarkation,
Mm-hmm.
of embarkation.
Right.
and I was in charge of the outfit, and I was very happy. It's finally found something the old man couldn't beat.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went overseas, and I thought that would be the end of it, you know.
Oh, now, did you sail with a convoy?
I'm sorry?
Did you sail in a convoy?
Yes, we did.
What was that like?
Yes, it was, well, it was the longest ocean coast crossings. Do you know something about that already?
But tell me your experience.
Oh, well, we were assigned to, it was in New York. I don't know the name of the camp something.
Camp Shanks. Or
Huh?
Camp Shanks, New York? Camp Shanks?
I can't understand the last word.
Shanks? Well, people sailed out of Fort Dix or out of Camp Shanks. So one of those probably. Anyway.
If you write it down, I probably, you know,
Ah, here we go.
I can't. I was there just so briefly. No. That was Fort Dix.
Yeah. Yeah, Fort Dix could be. Yeah.
Fort Dix.
All right. Okay.
Anyway,
So
and we were introduced to our ship, and it was a pretty little ship. And it was in April. And he carried 24 officers and 240 men. He must have been replacements were going over to. It was supposed to go from that, not Hoboken, but one of the departments. But the ship itself was a real pretty little ship, 2,700 tons, which is not much at all.
mm-hmm.
I was very excited. That was something I really wanted to see. Well, I was always the youngest person there, and I also was the only person knew who he was, because all these other guys were just casual people waiting to go over there and fill a specific post, and we filled out the list, I guess. So they said, well, you're going to be sanitation officer on the trip over. And 16 days later, I was. And my guys were the only organized ones, the only ones who were actually committed to somebody after we got on over there. So we were ordered to. I got my orders while I was en route to go to Wales, which is Barry. Barry, which is right next to what's the capital of Wales? Cardiff. Cardiff. And it was we took off. It was what it was a relatively new boat. It was it was 2,500 tons, just nothing. But it's clean. It was a grease line boat that had plying the Caribbean, were transporting fruit from one place to the other, and then we had to go, and it was a part, but it was all new. So we were in the center of the convoy, because the commander of the convoy was on that ship. It must, but it was little, but it was it was very much in demand. We took off, and what happened the next 16 days was probably a good novel subject. Anyway, we headed north. If you've ever flown, have you flown to Europe? Well, you know, you go on the top, or you go that way. So we headed north, and this was in April, and we immediately ran into bad weather. So the 240 guys all got seasick, and Engel got to be sanitation officer. But you know, it was the best thing because we were organized. We had a job to do, and we knew each other. We got by quite. Nobody ever threw up on my outfit. We wished we had, but we didn't. We just were in bad weather, all the way up the Arctic Circle. You know, that's the geography of that area is quite interesting. And anyway, we went up there, and then we got attacked by submarines, and the convoy did. They had three destroyer escorts. And we ran into wild, beautiful, stormy seas. And the Germans hit one of the destroyer escorts and disabled it in the core, in the rudder. Mm-hmm. So then we decided we had about 40 ships in that convoy, including three aircraft carriers, but they were old ones, and they were being used to transport planes to England, mostly. So anyway, I found it absolutely fascinating. I'd never been across the ocean, mm-hmm. And we went south down to the Canary Islands, and I can remember we crossed till we cut south, and there's another island in there. And anyway, we headed south then, cut through the, and I mean cut with dear.
Let's see. Did you go through the straits?
Gibraltar? No.
Okay.
No. No, we went to Wales.
Okay. So you went south and then north again?
Then we went again, right. And came in and landed at Barry, Wales. And where we docked. And I had my instructions on where to go. And we stayed together. Actually, the outfit, the guys I was with, were not top-notch people. I don't know how they got that. They were not bright. They were nice. They worked hard, and but they were not quick. But I didn't know any better. Maybe this way. So we went. It was 16 days later. We docked at Barry, or they call it Barry, in Wales. It's a suburb, I guess you call it, of Cardiff. Where we put a train, to go all the way across in southern England to a place that was called Headcorn, and I kept calling it Cornhead. And anyway, we got in there. We our equipment, and you do have a certain amount of equipment to go with it. Was being shipped separately, so we had to wait and catch up with that. And Headcorn was an American fighter base, and that was where we were supposed to be going. But I remember I loved that trip because it was so beautiful that it was so damn cold, and snow and but I didn't get sick. Like I say, I often wished I could. But anyway, we made our way. We got there to Cornhead. It's only probably 10 or 15 miles from the coast, from the British from the Channel, English Channel, way over on the far side. And the reason was, of course, the Germans were, by that time, had been lost the bombing of London, and it transferred over to the launching of V1s instead, which we knew nothing about. That was all new. Anyway, we got over there, and we were getting our stuff together, waiting for it to come by separate boat. And anyway, a woman met us in the late afternoon or evening. This really cracked up a woman who became a good friend of mine later. Anyway, I was still naive as hell, and she met us at the train, and she says, "Can I help you?" I said, "Well, yeah, we're supposed to have somebody there take us to this air base." Well, I'm the lady porter. Can I help you? And this way I told her later was, I said, I really admire the British. Here's Lady Poor meets us on the coast of England, and I suppose Lord Porter is someplace else. So I told this story to a gal who was a pretty well known. She was in vaudeville, and she was the first cousin to one of the judges later on in our court. So that's how little I knew. Anyway, I got there, and we were still waiting to get our stuff and trying to get organized. And all of a sudden, I get ordered again. And it was just for me alone. And I was being transferred to the headquarters of 19th Tactical Air Command. And that was then at Aldermaston Court, which was a which is the airport, and a castle, which to anybody there meant fleas, whatever it may be. And I was told to go report there. Well, again, down. This is where I'm trying to stay away from. Now, by God, they were doing it. And I had, so I ended up in the with the 19th Air Force, Air Command, and where it was, that was an ordnance group, and they would be supervised. It was a tactical air command, so it would be following whenever they got across the channel, be following it wherever they were going. And we understood that Patton's Third Army had not arrived. Patton was having trouble around swearing and everything else. And I was just plain unhappy. I said, I've got this outfit. I trained him. I brought him over.
Mm-hmm.
He got him there on time, and this is not where I wanted to be. Well, fortunately, he was a 34-year-old lieutenant colonel, Jewish, and smart, and he had been an engineer in San Francisco for the Army. I liked him. He really was fair, and he and I hit it off. We were about the only youngest ones there, and I was still 18, I guess.
You were probably closer to 20 by then.
19 by then. Yeah. So I didn't know where to go, but I got along really well with that colonel. He was not a politician. You could tell he knew what he was doing, and I guess I felt sorry for him, and he felt sorry for me.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, we hit it off. It may have been because I thought I was Jewish. I don't know. I didn't care. I mean, but I liked him. And this was before June.
Yeah.
D-Day?
Yeah, D-Day. Yeah, D-Day is June.
Yeah.
What duties did you have?
What?
What kind of work did you do in England?
Dellsville. I was ammunition and bomb disposal officer. It was a glorified title that meant nothing. But an interesting place. So I dutifully went to Aldermaston Court. I took my wife there years later. It's a beautiful old castle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It had been it had been visited by Queen Elizabeth I during the Spanish Armada,
Mm-hmm.
and it's beautiful, in good shape. And they use that as a headquarters, and it was also it had both American and British components in there, including gliders, American gliders, British gliders, American fighters. Anyway, pretty. It was just a handsome house, and set up, and it was on the Thames River. on the Upper Thames, about 60 miles west of London. So I was there in June until about the June 6th was the invasion, and it was very exciting. But we had our orders were to go with advanced units of the Air Force across the Channel, and I wanted to go, and I thought that was real exciting. I told the colonel I really would like to go. Well, there was I got outranked. Captain Gutterman wanted to go too. Since he was a captain, he outranked me. So he went ahead, and we stayed there until we got our orders to his headquarters to move on to the continent. I can't remember just exactly. Anyway, I started to go to the Anglican church there, and it had a church on the premises that was an Episcopal church. It was something like 900 years old, and I really loved the countryside. So anyway, eventually we all went over, and in the meantime, the invasion came in until June 6th.
Mhm.
And what did I do? I was a pencil pusher, and I didn't like it. And the colonel knew I didn't like it. He didn't like it either. So I often wonder what happened to him. He had a beautiful wife. Had her picture in his office. Anyway.
Now, when you were in England, did you go to London? Did you visit London?
Yes, I did. Yes. I got to London several times. At first I was one thing I didn't like. I wanted to be with the guys I was with, but that's not the way they did it. They put me with pilots, and that was really interesting. I became good friends with the intelligence officer of the squadron, and he was a movie star, a movie man. He had been. You ever heard of Dorothy Thompson? She was a comedian. She helped write. He was a screenwriter, and he was really good. So he was very knowledgeable about everything to do with Hollywood. And when you couldn't nothing else to do, he'd sit there and talk at night about Hollywood. So he and Dorothy Thompson were I don't know if they were divorced that time or not, but he married her twice, and he ultimately died after having been married with her a second time. And he was extremely interesting. He got us he got us pictures of all the movie stars that could hang in the officers' club, and we gabbed. Because there wasn't much to do at night, except to watch those planes. The Lancaster bombers were the ones the British were the ones that were flying overhead, but the fighters were flying immediately from and going across, and they would pick up coverage of the bombers as they went across what they call Buzz Bomb Alley. And anyway, I was there when those buzz bombs were coming, and I've got to pee.
Okay. I will. All right. Okay. So right now, you were talking about being in England, and you were talking about the buzz bombs coming over.
Yeah, the buzz bombs came in just after, or before and after D-Day, and there were a lot of them, and I was in Aldernaston, and when I first saw one, I didn't know what the hell it was. I mean, it was flying low, maybe 300 to 500 feet. You know, they were trying to go for London, but basically the Americans and the British both were trying to knock those things over before they got to London.
Mm-hmm.
It was more of a terror weapon than a practical weapon. But I remember weather was nice, finally, and I really didn't feel like I was doing anything. And the colonel felt sorry for it. I wanted, anyway, I told him about myself, and that I didn't want politics, and I would really like to get over. And so anyway, we got along real well. We crossed south, but we boarded a ship at Southampton, and then we landed on the other side for staying overnight or two in the harbors on the other side. That would be Utah Beach, and we went. Somehow, he wanted me to be with him. I don't think he had it. He just probably felt I was too young to be over there. But anyway, so we went aboard this coal ship, dirty, filthy, and we slept on the deck with all the black cinders. And when we were crossing the channel, they were still places that were not subdued. They were trying to bombard some of the Channel Islands, and I was really interested. It was quite exciting. And the Germans would come in at night, and they would drop flares on the beach, and you could see all the way down the coast when they learned those effects. So eventually we landed, and they had I guess all three of those or four of those landing spots were about the same. They had portable docks that they fixed together, and then they drove the vehicles on those, and then moved them onto the shore. And anyway, when he landed, we led to a collection spot right on Utah Beach, and we had tents on the high part of that. They were pretty well secured by then. But it was interesting. It was apple. They had apple trees and orchards on the other side, and it was very pretty, and I was very excited. I think I know why the colonel wanted me with him. Maybe somebody told him to keep an eye on me. I don't know. I never knew what the hell was going on. But anyway, I knew what to do with the shelter half, how to make two lots. So we shared a shelter half, and also I knew how to start a fire. Things I learned in Boy Scouts, and I don't know if I shot or somebody else shot a pheasant. I don't know. I like to think I did, but I'm not sure. Anyway, we got across, and we landed safely, and then finally in a day or two, but the pilots, the people going across, went across like they did on the English side, where the pilots slept in the same tent, and that was really an experience because they were flying missions, and almost without interruption. I was there for 1 week, 2 weeks, and it was awful. The time we got through, they were all gone. They all got shot down, I guess, something. And it was too bad. Didn't think too much about it at the time. It took 20 years of thinking to figure that one out. And so then we headed out. We headed south inland, and then west. And by that time, we understood that we were supposed to be giving air cover support for General Patton's Third Army. And anyway, I remember we did get shot at. He and I got shot at by very casual snipers, but that was all. They didn't come close. And so we finally got to where we were going, and then I stayed there. I can't remember. So much was happening. But that was, I should mention beforehand, while we were still in England, that I was assigned on a special detail to the Thames estuary, and it was a experimental assignment. The American Navy had developed a 4.5 or 5 inch rocket propelled rocket.
Mm-hmm.
The Navy used it for aiming it at naval ships primarily, I suppose, or whatever they could hit with it. And so much happened at one time. I was assigned to the very buzz bombed while we were there, because I was transferred to a base, I guess, farther east and they had set up targets in the estuary, in the Thames estuary, and they were using American and British bombs, fighters, as targets to train them how to handle these things. They were designed for a different kind of plane, and I found that very, very interesting. And we had a lot of activity to watch. See these planes take off, and then they would remain. They had a cutoff point toward the channel. Before that, they were defended by airplanes, and closer to London, they were handled by aircraft. You couldn't do them both. So I spent a very few interesting nights, mostly nights. You come out at night, and it really was interesting. You could see them. They would follow the big searchlights, and if they ever got a fix on one, they could usually pretty much get most of them. And they were trying to use those rockets, and they got quite a few. And,
were the rockets fired from the ground, or were the rockets fired from the ground up, or were they fired by airplanes? Where did they fire the rockets from?
Who, Germans?
No, where did the? Were you shooting rockets at the buzz bombs?
Yeah.
Okay, and did airplanes shoot the rockets, or did ships shoot the
No,
rockets?
they were armed them with rockets underneath their wings.
Right.
I guess each plane could probably carry maybe 6. Mm-hmm. And it's been a long time. They were, and some people claimed it wasn't possible, but they were doing. These V1s. They had no pilot, of course, and they had about 1,000 kg warload, and they were designed to very simple. They were terminated by running out of gas, and so both the British and the Americans, and then they were also giving support to the overhead Lancaster bombers, or to the B-17s and 24 in the daytime. They didn't dare try to they didn't dare fly the Lancasters. They were too slow, and they would get shot down. So we saw an awful lot of action, and I mean, it was of both types. And I didn't have really much to do except to be there and to observe. And but it was quite exciting. I was stationed. I was housed in a farmhouse with a woman who was married, whose husband was off fighting the wars, and I stayed at her house, and she had children, and we ended up a couple times sitting underneath the dining room table. And they were dropping around us quite a bit. Ones that were either shot down or else were misgauge.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly was it certainly was what you call a real accurate.
Weapon. No. All right.
But anyway, a lot of things happened in that period. We had I ended up going inland with Colonel Simons, and I got orders. I was pre-law. Well, I I made myself a record. It was pretty funny. I was appointed as defense counsel for some guys who were being court-martialed, and so they had a Judge Advocate General's office there with that headquarters. That was the same thing at the division,
Mm-hmm.
I would say. And they appointed me. I hadn't even been to law school yet, because I said pre-law. Then
Mm-hmm.
they thought, well, I ought to be able to do it. Well, interestingly enough, there were two very seasoned officers in the Judge Advocate General's office. One was a fellow from Philadelphia, a lawyer. The other was a fellow from New York, also a lawyer. And so I went to them. I said, "Hey, I got this job. I need some advice. What do I do?" They said, "Well, okay." So this was fun. Of course, like I said, a lot older than they were. They were a lot older than I was. Yeah, they were getting a kick out of it, you know. So I was assigned to defend some of these kids that were being court-martialed. So I read the manual for court-martial, one into the other. But I remembered, and then I went over all the things, and I earmarked it, you know, places, all the things I could object to, and all that stuff. And I represented three guys, I recall. One of the offenses had happened right on the beach. This fellow, Houston was his name. He was court-martialed for his conduct for going out that night in a local town getting drunk. And the testimony was that he had slept in his shelter half on the edge of the beach, and he was drunk. And he came in. I forget now.
All right. Well, this tape